The autumn wind howled through the Scottish Highlands as Thomas Crawford stood at his post outside Balmoral Castle. He had been a royal guard for 15 years, and nothing surprised him anymore, or so he thought. That cold October evening in 2023 would change everything he believed about duty, loyalty, and the secrets that ancient walls could hold. Before we continue with this incredible true story, please subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so you never miss another amazing real-life story that will touch your heart and change the way you see the world. Thomas was 52 years old, a man of discipline and honor. His father had been a guard before him, and his grandfather before that. The Crawford family had served the royal household for 3 generations. Thomas knew every stone, every corridor, every hidden corner of Balmoral Castle. He had walked these halls in sunshine and storms, through celebrations and sorrows. The castle was more than just his workplace. It was his second home. On that particular evening, Thomas was assigned to the night shift in the East Wing. The royal family was not in residence, which meant the castle was quieter than usual. Only a skeleton crew of staff remained to maintain the property. Thomas liked these quiet nights. They gave him time to think, to remember, to appreciate the weight of history that surrounded him. Around midnight, Thomas heard a sound that made him freeze. It came from the library, a room that should have been locked and empty. The noise was faint, but distinct. Something had fallen. His training kicked in immediately. Thomas moved silently down the corridor, his hand resting on his radio, ready to call for backup if needed. He pushed open the heavy oak door to the library. The room was dark except for a sliver of moonlight coming through the tall windows. Thomas switched on his flashlight and swept the beam across the room. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling. The smell of old leather and paper filled his nostrils. Everything seemed normal at first glance. Then he saw it. One of the large portrait paintings had shifted on the wall. It hung at an odd angle, as if someone had bumped into it. Thomas walked closer, his heart beating faster. The painting was of Queen Victoria, a stern woman in black, looking down at him with knowing eyes. He reached up to straighten it. As his fingers touched the heavy frame, he felt something strange. The wall behind the painting was hollow. Thomas had been in this library 1,000 times. He knew this wall was supposed to be solid stone. He knocked gently. The sound confirmed it. There was a space behind the wall. His curiosity overcame his caution. Thomas carefully lifted the painting off its hooks and leaned it against a nearby table. Behind it was a small wooden panel, no bigger than a book. The wood was old and dark, blending perfectly with the stone around it. If the painting had not shifted, no one would ever have noticed it. Thomas examined the panel closely. There was a tiny latch, so subtle that his fingers almost missed it. He hesitated. Should he call someone? Report this discovery immediately. But something made him pause. A feeling he could not explain. This was meant for him to find. He was sure of it. He pressed the latch. The panel swung open with a soft click. Inside was a small compartment, lined with faded red velvet. And there, wrapped in cloth, was an envelope. Thomas picked it up with shaking hands. The envelope was made of thick, expensive paper, yellowed with age. On the front, in elegant handwriting, were 3 words that made his blood run cold. To be opened. There was no name, no date, no other instruction. Just those 3 words. Thomas turned the envelope over. It was sealed with red wax, stamped with a symbol he recognized immediately. The royal seal. But not the current one. This was an older version, one that had not been used in decades. Thomas stood in the silent library, holding the envelope in his hands. Every instinct told him to report this immediately, to follow protocol, to let someone with more authority make the decision. But another part of him, the part that had served loyally for 15 years, wanted to know what was inside. Why had this been hidden? Who had hidden it? And why now, after all these years, had it been revealed? He looked at the envelope again, turning it over in the beam of his flashlight. The paper was old, but well preserved. Someone had taken great care to protect whatever was inside. The wax seal was unbroken, which meant that in all the years this envelope had been hidden behind that wall. No one had opened it. Thomas made a decision that would change his life forever. He carefully broke the seal. The wax crumbled in his fingers, falling like red snow onto the library floor. He opened the envelope and pulled out several sheets of paper. The handwriting was the same elegant script as on the envelope. He began to read. What he saw in those first few lines made his hands tremble. This was not just any document. This was a will, a secret will. And the name at the top made his heart stop. It was written by someone from the royal family, someone whose death had been mourned by millions, someone whose legacy was supposed to be settled and decided long ago. But this document told a different story. A story that no one knew. A story that had been deliberately hidden. And Thomas Crawford, a simple royal guard doing his duty, now held in his hands a secret that could shake the very foundations of everything he had. Sworn to protect? Thomas read the document 3 times before his mind could fully process what he was seeing. The will was dated 1997, written just months before the death of Princess Diana. His hands shook as he traced the elegant handwriting with his eyes. This could not be real. But the paper, the seal, the location where it was hidden, all pointed to its authenticity. The document was not long, but every word carried immense weight. Diana had written about her wishes for her sons, for her charities, and for certain personal belongings that she wanted distributed in ways that differed from her official will. But that was not the most shocking part. At the bottom of the document were instructions about a trust fund, a secret trust fund that no one knew existed. According to the will, Diana had set aside a substantial amount of money, not for her sons directly, but for the children of her staff members, the people who had served her loyally, who had protected her, who had been with her during her darkest moments. She had wanted to ensure their children would have opportunities for education and a better life. The fund was to be administered quietly, without publicity, without anyone knowing it came from her. Thomas felt tears in his eyes as he read her words. She had written that the people who served the royal family were often forgotten, their sacrifices overlooked. Their children deserved a chance at dreams that money could buy. She had arranged everything through a private lawyer in Scotland, someone she trusted completely. The document named this lawyer and provided instructions on how to activate the trust. But there was more. Diana had written a personal note at the end, explaining why she had hidden this will at Balmoral. She wrote that if anything happened to her, if her official wishes were contested or complicated, this document would serve as proof of her true intentions. She trusted that someday, when the time was right, someone honest would find it. Someone who would do the right thing. Thomas sat down heavily in one of the library chairs. The weight of what he held was crushing. This was not just a historical document. This was something that could affect real people, real lives right now. The children of former staff members, some of whom might still be struggling, could receive life-changing help. But bringing this forward would also bring attention, questions, investigations. It would thrust him into the center of a media storm. He thought about his own family. His daughter Sarah was 23, working 2 jobs to pay off her student loans. His son Michael was 18, wondering if he could afford university. Thomas had never asked for special treatment. He had done his job with pride, never expecting anything beyond his salary. But now, reading Diana's words about staff families, he wondered if this fund might include the children of current guards as well. No, that was not the point. This was not about him or his children. This was about honoring a promise made by someone who had cared deeply about fairness and kindness. Thomas stood up, his decision made. He would report this discovery. He would follow the proper channels. But first, he needed to make sure the document was protected. He carefully placed the papers back in the envelope and returned it to the hidden compartment. He would leave it exactly as he found it until he could speak with his supervisor in the morning. Thomas straightened the portrait of Queen Victoria and stepped back. The wall looked completely normal again. If he had not seen it himself, he would never have guessed the secret it held as he left the library. Thomas felt the enormity of the situation settling over him. By morning, everything would change. His name would be attached to this discovery forever. There would be questions about how he found it, why he opened it, what he did with the information. Some people might accuse him of overstepping, of violating privacy. of causing unnecessary complications. But Thomas knew the truth. He had stumbled upon this discovery by chance, or perhaps not by chance at all. Perhaps, as Diana had written, it was meant to be found by someone honest, someone who would do the right thing regardless of the consequences. He finished his shift in a daze, walking his rounds mechanically while his mind raced with thoughts. When dawn finally broke over the Scottish hills, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Thomas felt as if he had lived an entire lifetime in one night. He had entered the library as a simple guard. He had left it as a keeper of a secret that could change everything. At 6 in the morning, when his replacement arrived, Thomas went immediately to find his supervisor, Captain James Morrison. James was a stern man in his 60s, with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He had served the royal household even longer than Thomas, and he commanded respect from everyone who worked under him. Thomas found James in the security office, reviewing the night reports. When Thomas asked to speak privately, James looked up with concern. Thomas never requested private meetings. Something serious must have happened. They went into a small conference room. Thomas closed the door and sat down across from James. For a moment, he could not find the words. How did one begin a conversation like this? How did one explain that the entire night had been spent grappling with a secret that had been hidden for over 25 years? Thomas took a deep breath and began to speak. He told James everything, from the sound in the library to the shifted painting, from the hidden compartment to the document inside. He explained what the will contained, what it meant, what it could do for people who had served loyally and never expected anything in return. James listened without interrupting. His face remained neutral, but Thomas could see the shock in his eyes. When Thomas finished, silence filled the room. James stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the castle grounds. Minutes passed. Thomas waited, his heart pounding. Finally, James turned around. His expression was grave, but not angry. He looked at Thomas with something that might have been respect, or perhaps pity, for the burden Thomas now carried. You have done the right thing by telling me, James said quietly. But you understand what happens next? This discovery will go up the chain of command. Lawyers will be involved. Investigators will want to verify everything. Your life will not be the same after today. Are you prepared for that? Thomas nodded. He had known this from the moment he broke the seal on that envelope. There was no going back now. The secret was out, and the consequences, whatever they might be, would have to be faced with the same honor and duty that had guided him throughout his career. Within hours, the small conference room became the center of intense activity. Captain Morrison had immediately contacted the head of royal security, who in turn notified senior palace officials. By noon, 3 lawyers had arrived at Balmoral. Along with a historical documents expert and a member of the Keeper of the Privy Purse office, Thomas was asked to recount his discovery multiple times, each telling more detailed than the last. They wanted to know the exact time he heard the noise, why he was in that corridor, how he had noticed the hollow wall, what made him decide to open the compartment. Every question felt like an accusation. Even though the lawyers assured him he was not in trouble, the library was sealed off as a potential historical site. The experts photographed everything, measured the hidden compartment, analyzed the construction of the secret panel. They estimated it had been installed sometime in the late 1990s, which matched the date on the document. Someone had gone to great lengths to create this hiding place, ensuring it would blend seamlessly with the centuries-old architecture. The document itself was removed carefully and taken to a secure location for analysis. The handwriting would be compared to known samples of Diana's writing. The paper would be tested to confirm its age. The wax seal would be examined under microscopes. Every detail would be scrutinized to determine if this was genuine or an elaborate hoax. Thomas was placed on administrative leave, which he understood was standard procedure, but felt like punishment anyway. He was told not to speak about what he had found with anyone, not his fellow guards, not his family, not even his wife. The weight of the secret he carried became heavier with each passing day. He went home to Edinburgh, to the small house he shared with his wife Margaret and their daughter Sarah. Michael was away at his grandmother's, which Thomas was grateful for. He could barely look his wife in the eye without wanting to tell her everything. Margaret knew something was wrong. She had been married to Thomas for 28 years and could read his moods better than anyone. "They put you on leave?" she asked that evening, her voice tight with worry. "Thomas, what happened? Did you do something wrong?" "No," he said firmly. "I found something. Something important. But I cannot talk about it yet. You have to trust me, Margaret. I did nothing wrong, but my life is about to become very complicated." She studied his face, searching for answers he could not give. Finally, she nodded. "I trust you. I always have. Whatever this is, we will face it together." Her faith in him made Thomas want to cry. He pulled her close and held her, wondering if she would still trust him when the truth came out. When their names appeared in newspapers and their quiet life was invaded by reporters and cameras, when people questioned his motives and accused him of seeking attention or money, 5 days after the discovery, Thomas received a call asking him to return to Balmoral. The tests were complete. The document was authentic. The handwriting was definitely Diana's. The paper dated to the correct period. The seal was genuine. Everything Thomas had found was real. A meeting was scheduled with senior palace officials and the royal family's legal team. Thomas drove back to Balmoral with his stomach in knots. He had no idea what to expect. Would they thank him for his honesty? Would they be angry that he had opened the envelope instead of reporting it immediately? Would they try to suppress the document and pretend it never existed? The meeting took place in the same library where Thomas had made his discovery. He found it fitting somehow. The portrait of Queen Victoria had been rehung, but Thomas could still see in his mind the hidden compartment behind it. The room felt different now. It was charged with the weight of what it had concealed for so long. Present at the meeting were Captain Morrison, 3 palace lawyers, a representative from the royal household, and to Thomas's surprise, a man in his 70s who introduced himself as Richard Pemberton, the lawyer Diana had named in her document. "Mr. Crawford," Pemberton began. His voice warmed despite the formal setting. "You have uncovered something quite extraordinary. I want you to know that I have been waiting for this document to surface for 26 years. Princess Diana entrusted me with the administration of a trust fund, but she told me there was a backup document, hidden safely, in case anything happened to the primary paperwork. I never knew where she had hidden it." Until now, Thomas felt relief wash over him. This man was not angry. He was grateful, Pemberton continued. The trust Diana created was indeed for the children of royal household staff. Over the years, I have administered it quietly, helping young people attend university, start businesses, receive medical care they otherwise could not afford. But the primary legal document was destroyed in a fire at my old office 10 years ago. I had copies, but they were not originals, and some parties questioned their validity. What you found, Mr. Crawford, is the original proof that Diana intended this trust to exist and continue. One of the palace lawyers spoke up. The document also contains instructions that were not in the copies Mr. Pemberton possessed. Specifically, it names additional beneficiaries and expands the trust's purpose. This changes the scope of what we can do to honor Diana's wishes. Thomas listened as they explained the legal implications. The trust would now be formally recognized. More families would be helped. Diana's true intentions would be honored. But there was also the matter of publicity. Once this story became public, and it would become public, there would be intense media interest. "Mr. Crawford," the royal household representative said, "we want to handle this announcement carefully. We would like your permission to share your name and role in this discovery. You would be credited with finding and protecting this important document. However, we understand if you prefer to remain anonymous, the choice is yours." Thomas thought about it. Part of him wanted to hide, to go back to his quiet life and let others take credit or blame. But another part, the part that had served with honor for 15 years, knew that hiding would be wrong. Diana had trusted that someone honest would find her document. He had been that someone. He could not now pretend it had never happened. "Use my name," he said clearly. "I have nothing to hide. I did my duty, and I will stand by it." The room erupted in nods of approval. Captain Morrison clapped him on the shoulder. Even the stern lawyers smiled. Thomas had made the right choice, they told him. He was a credit to the service, they said. He represented the best of what the royal household stood for, they assured him. But Thomas barely heard them. His mind was on the families who would be helped, the young people who would receive opportunities they never dreamed possible. He thought about Diana, writing that document with hope and trust that someday it would matter. She had been right. It mattered more than she could have known. That evening, Thomas was allowed to call Margaret and tell her a limited version of what had happened. He explained that he had found an important historical document, that it was authentic, and that it would help many people. He told her there would be media attention, that their lives would change, but that he had done nothing wrong. Margaret listened quietly. When he finished, she said simply, "I am proud of you, Thomas. Whatever comes next, I am proud to be your wife." Those words sustained him through what came next, because the announcement of the discovery would change everything, not just for Thomas, but for dozens of families who would soon learn that a princess they had served, or whose parents had served, had never forgotten them. Asterisk, the announcement came on a Wednesday morning, carefully timed to reach the evening news cycles. The palace released a statement explaining that a document written by Princess Diana had been discovered at Balmoral Castle by Royal Guard Thomas Crawford during a routine security check. The document, now authenticated, revealed Diana's wishes regarding a charitable trust for the families of royal household staff. Within hours, Thomas's name was everywhere. Newspapers printed his photo, reporters camped outside his Edinburgh home, and his phone rang constantly with requests for interviews. Margaret had to take time off work because journalists followed her to the hospital where she worked as a nurse. Sarah came home from her job in tears. Overwhelmed by the sudden attention from co-workers and strangers alike, Thomas had prepared himself for publicity. But nothing could have prepared him for this level of scrutiny. Some reporters painted him as a hero, a humble guard who had honored a princess's memory. Others questioned his motives, suggesting he had been searching for something valuable, or worse, that he had known about the document all along and only revealed it now for personal gain. The most painful attacks came from conspiracy. Theorists online who claimed the document was fake, planted by Thomas himself to seek fame or money. They analyzed every aspect of his story looking for inconsistencies. They dug into his background, his finances, his family history. They found nothing suspicious because there was nothing to find. But that did not stop the speculation. Through it all, Thomas maintained his dignity. He gave one official interview to a respected journalist, in which he calmly explained exactly what had happened. He showed no anger toward his critics, no pride in his discovery, only a quiet insistence that he had simply done his duty. The interview helped shift public opinion in his favor. But the damage to his family's peace had been done. What Thomas had not expected was the response from other families. Within days of the announcement, Richard Pemberton's office was flooded with inquiries from people who believed they might be eligible for help from Diana's trust. Some had worked for the royal household decades ago. Others were children or grandchildren of former staff members. All of them had stories of struggle, of dreams deferred, of opportunities missed because of financial limitations. Pemberton worked tirelessly to verify claims and determine eligibility according to Diana's instructions. The document Thomas had found specified that the trust was meant for families of staff who had served during Diana's lifetime and who had demonstrated loyalty and discretion. It was not meant to be a general fund for anyone who had ever worked for the royal family, but rather a recognition of those who had been there during her most difficult years. Among those who qualified was Maria Santos, a woman in her 60s who had worked as a housemaid at Kensington Palace in the 1990s. Her daughter Alina was now 35, working as a nurse's aide while caring for her own 3 children. Alina had always dreamed of becoming a full registered nurse, but could never afford the additional training. When Pemberton contacted Maria to inform her that Alina qualified for educational assistance from Diana's trust, Maria wept. "The princess was always kind to me," Maria told reporters who came to interview her. "She would ask about my daughter, about our lives. She treated me like a person, not just a maid. I never imagined she would remember us after all these years. Alina enrolled in a nursing program that fall, her tuition fully covered by the trust. She named her fourth child, born the following spring, Diana Maria Santos, in honor of the princess and her mother. Another beneficiary was James Thornton, whose father had been one of Diana's personal protection officers. James was now 28, a talented artist who had been working construction jobs to pay the bills while selling paintings on weekends. The trust provided him with a grant to attend an art residency program in Florence. His first major exhibition, 2 years later, would be dedicated to themes of service, loyalty, and unexpected grace. There was Amelia Chen, whose mother had been Diana's private secretary for 3 years. Amelia had been accepted to medical school, but had deferred her admission twice because she could not afford it. The trust covered her education. She graduated at the top of her class and now works as a pediatrician in an underserved community, providing free care 1 day a week in Diana's memory. As these stories emerged, public perception of Thomas's discovery shifted dramatically. What had initially seemed like a curiosity, a historical footnote, revealed itself to be something much more powerful. This was Diana's legacy, continuing to touch lives decades after her death. This was proof that her compassion had been genuine, not just a performance for cameras. Thomas watched these stories unfold with mixed emotions. He was genuinely happy for the families being helped. Their gratitude and joy were exactly what Diana had hoped for. But he also struggled with his own role in the narrative. He had not wanted to be a hero. He had simply wanted to do the right thing. The constant attention made him uncomfortable. His children, however, saw things differently. Sarah came to him one evening with tears in her eyes. "Dad," she said, "I have been reading about Alina Santos, about how she can finally become a nurse because of what you found. She is my age, Dad. She has kids. She had given up on her dreams. And now she gets another chance. You did that. You gave her that chance." No, Thomas corrected gently. "Princess Diana gave her that chance. I just found the paper." "But you could have ignored it," Sarah insisted. "You could have put it back and walked away. You could have called someone else to deal with it. But you did not. You took responsibility. You faced all this criticism and attention because you knew it was right. That is why you are a hero, Dad. Not because you found something, but because you had the courage to see it through." Her words helped Thomas see his role differently. Perhaps he had been meant to find that document. Perhaps his 15 years of loyal service had been preparation for that one moment when integrity mattered more than convenience. The most unexpected development came 3 months after the announcement. Thomas received a letter from Kensington Palace requesting his presence at a private ceremony. When he arrived, nervous and unsure what to expect, he found himself in a room with 5 other people, all family members of staff who were benefiting from the trust. Richard Pemberton was there, along with several palace officials. They were gathered to watch a video, a message that Diana had recorded shortly before her death. Pemberton explained that she had left this video with him, to be shown only if the hidden document was ever found and the trust was formally recognized. The screen flickered to life, and there was Diana, sitting in what looked like Pemberton's office, her face serious but warm. She spoke directly to the camera, directly to them. "If you are watching this," she said, "it means that someone honest found my document and brought it forward. It means that the trust I created is being honored. I want to speak directly to the families who are being helped by this fund. You may not know me personally, but your parents, your grandparents, they served me during some of the most difficult times of my life. They showed me kindness when I needed it most. They protected my sons. They stood by me with loyalty and discretion. This is my way of saying thank you. This is my way of ensuring that your service, your family service, means something beyond just a job. I hope this trust gives you opportunities to follow your dreams, to create the life you deserve. And to whoever found this document, thank you for your honesty. Thank you for doing the right thing. You have proven that there are still people in this world who can be trusted with secrets, who understand the meaning of duty and honor. Your integrity has made all of this possible." The video ended. The room was silent except for the sound of quiet crying. Thomas sat with his head bowed, tears streaming down his face. He had spent months wondering if he had done the right thing, if the disruption to his life had been worth it. Now he knew. Diana had trusted that someone like him would find her document. She had believed that goodness still existed in the world, and she had been right. 6 months after the discovery, life began to settle into a new normal for Thomas and his family. The reporters had moved on to other stories. The conspiracy theories had faded as the authenticity of the document became undeniable. Thomas was allowed to return to his duties at Balmoral, though he was now assigned to different areas of the castle. The library remained a place he visited with mixed feelings, knowing what secrets it had held. But the story was far from over. The trust fund continued to grow and help more families. Richard Pemberton, energized by the renewed purpose of his work, expanded the trust's reach beyond just educational support. With the additional instructions found in Diana's document, the fund now also provided grants for small business ventures, medical expenses for chronic conditions, and emergency assistance for families facing unexpected hardships. One particularly moving case involved Patrick O'Brien, whose mother had been a kitchen assistant at Buckingham's Palace during the 1980s and 90s. Patrick was now 40 years old. A single father of 2 after his wife had passed away from cancer 3 years earlier. He had been working 3 jobs to support his children while also caring for his aging mother, who suffered from dementia. The trust provided him with funds to hire a part-time caregiver for his mother, allowing him to reduce his work hours and spend more time with his children during their critical teenage years. When Patrick learned about the trust, he wrote a letter to Thomas, which was forwarded through the palace. In it, he described how his mother, even in her confused state, remembered Princess Diana with perfect clarity. She would tell him stories about how Diana would come into the kitchens to thank the staff personally, how she remembered everyone's names, how she once brought medicine for Patrick when he was sick as a child and his mother could not afford to miss work. "Mr. Crawford," Patrick wrote, "you have given my family back our dignity. My children will not grow up watching their father destroy himself trying to keep everyone afloat. My mother will spend her final years in comfort and peace. Princess Diana's kindness has reached across decades to save us, and it only happened because you chose to be honest when you could have walked away. Thank you for being the kind of man who still does the right thing even when it is hard." Thomas kept that letter in his desk drawer at home. On difficult days, when doubt crept in, he would read it and remember why integrity mattered. The discovery also had unexpected effects on the royal household staff. Many employees, some who had worked there for decades, found themselves reflecting on their own service and what it meant. The culture within the palace began to shift subtly. Staff members felt more valued, more seen. The royal family themselves took note of Diana's gesture and began implementing new initiatives to recognize and support their employees. A scholarship program was established in Diana's name, specifically for the children of current royal household staff. An employee assistance program was expanded to provide mental health support and financial counseling. These changes were not directly part of Diana's trust, but they were inspired by it. By the reminder that the people who served quietly in the background had families and dreams and struggles of their own, Thomas's own children benefited from this shift in perspective, though not from Diana's trust itself. Sarah was able to secure a better-paying position within the National Health Service. After completing a leadership program that the palace had helped sponsor for children of current employees, Michael received a grant to study engineering at university. A grant that was created in the wake of renewed attention to staff welfare. But perhaps the most profound impact was not measured in money or opportunities. It was measured in changed hearts and renewed faith. The story of Diana's hidden will reminded people that kindness matters, that the small acts of consideration we show to others can echo far beyond our lifetimes. It reminded them that there are still secrets worth keeping and truths worth revealing. Depending on what they serve, Thomas received hundreds of letters from people around the world who had been moved by the story. Some were from former staff members of various royal families, sharing their own experiences of being overlooked or undervalued. Others were from ordinary people who worked in service industries, who felt seen and validated by Diana's gesture of respect for those who served her. One letter came from a woman in America who had been a nanny for a wealthy family. She wrote about how she had been treated as invisible, how her own children had suffered because she was always taking care of someone else's. Reading about Diana's trust had moved her to leave that position and find work where she was treated with dignity. "Your discovery," she wrote, "reminded me that I deserve better, that my service has value, that my children matter. Thank you for that gift." Thomas had never imagined that finding a document in a library could ripple out to touch so many lives in so many ways. He had simply tried to do his job with honor. But that choice, that moment of integrity, when he could have walked away, had become something larger than himself. As the anniversary of the discovery approached, Thomas was asked to speak at a ceremony honoring the beneficiaries of Diana's trust. He had avoided public speaking whenever possible, but this felt important. These were the people whose lives had been changed. They deserved to hear directly from him. The ceremony took place at a venue in London, attended by over 60 families who had received help from the trust. Richard Pemberton introduced Thomas, praising his integrity and courage. When Thomas stood at the podium, looking out at the faces of people Diana had cared about enough to provide for decades after her death, he felt the weight of the moment. "I am not good with speeches," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I am a guard. I am used to standing quietly and watching. But today, I want to tell you what I have learned from all of this. I learned that Princess Diana was right. The people who serve faithfully, who show up every day and do their jobs with pride, they matter. Their families matter. Their dreams matter." She understood that in a way that most people in her position never do. And she did something about it, even knowing she might not live to see the results. He paused, gathering his thoughts. "When I found that document, I had a choice. I could have pretended I never saw it. I could have reported it and let others make the decisions. But I chose to open it, to read it, to make sure it reached the right people. I chose that because my father taught me that integrity means doing the right thing, even when no one is watching. Especially when no one is watching." Thomas looked around the room at the faces watching him. "You all represent Princess Diana's faith and goodness, in the idea that people can be trusted to do the right thing. You represent the lives she touched and the kindness she showed. I am honored to have played a small part in making sure her wishes were known. But the real honor belongs to her, for seeing you, for valuing you, for making sure you were never forgotten." The room erupted in applause. People stood, some crying, others smiling. Thomas stepped away from the podium, feeling lighter than he had in months. He had said what needed to be said. He had honored Diana's memory and the trust she had placed in the person, would eventually find her document after the ceremony. Families approached him to shake his hand, to thank him personally. Elena Santos introduced him to her children, telling them, "This is the man who made it possible for Mommy to finish school." James Thornton showed him photographs of his art exhibition in Florence. Amelia Chen, the medical student, told him she was specializing in pediatric cardiology because Diana had died from injuries that might have been prevented with different trauma care. Each story was a thread in a larger tapestry of impact. Each life touched was proof that one person's compassion could ripple forward through time. Thomas understood now that he had not just found a document. He had been part of something much larger, a testament to the enduring power of kindness and the importance of integrity. Asterisk. 2 years after Thomas Crawford discovered the hidden will, Balmoral Castle remained much the same as it had always been. The ancient stones still stood watch over the Scottish Highlands. The wind still howled through the towers on autumn nights, and guards still walked their posts with the same dedication that had defined the position for generations. But for those who knew the story, the library held a special significance now. Thomas stood in that library on a quiet morning, alone except for the portraits on the walls and the thousands of books that lined the shelves. He had requested this time, wanting to mark the anniversary privately before the day filled with its various obligations. The portrait of Queen Victoria hung straight on the wall, hiding the compartment that had changed his life. Thomas wondered if other secrets still waited in these walls. If other acts of kindness had been hidden away, waiting for the right moment and the right person to bring them to light. His life had settled into a rhythm again, though it would never be exactly as it was before. He still worked as a royal guard, still took pride in his service, still walked these halls with the same sense of duty. But now people recognized his name. Former staff members would seek him out at public events to thank him. Journalists still occasionally requested interviews, especially around anniversaries or when new beneficiaries came forward. The trust had helped over 150 families by now. Richard Pemberton, who had turned 80 the previous month, continued to administer it with the same dedication he had shown for over 2 decades. He had recently brought on 2 younger lawyers to help manage the growing demands. Ensuring that Diana's trust would continue long after he was gone, Thomas had learned that the trust was structured to be self-sustaining. Diana had invested wisely, and the returns had grown over the years. Pemberton estimated that the fund could continue helping families for at least another 50 years, possibly longer. It was a legacy that would outlive everyone who had known Diana personally, touching generations who would only know her story. The most recent beneficiary was a young woman named Sophie Williams, whose grandmother had been Diana's hairdresser. Sophie was 21 and had been diagnosed with a rare autoimmune condition that required expensive ongoing treatment. Her family had been struggling to afford both her medical care and her younger brother's education. The trust stepped in, covering her medical expenses and allowing her, parents, to support both children's futures without having to choose between them. When Sophie's grandmother heard the news, she told reporters about the time Diana had visited her in the hospital after a minor surgery, bringing flowers and sitting with her for an hour, even though she had no official obligation to do so. She was a real person, the grandmother said, not just a princess in a crown. She cared about people's real lives, their real problems. And here she is, still caring for my granddaughter all these years later. Thomas had met Sophie at a trust event. She was studying biochemistry, hoping to research treatments for conditions like her own. She told him that Diana's help had given her not just financial support, but hope. When you are sick and struggling, Sophie explained, you start to feel like your life does not matter, like you are just a burden. But knowing that someone like Princess Diana thought people like my family deserved help, it makes you feel valuable again. It makes you believe your life has purpose. Those words stayed with Thomas. He realized that the true gift Diana had left was not just the money, though that was important. It was the message behind it. The message that people who serve others matter, that their struggles are not invisible, that kindness is not forgotten. That legacy is built not through grand gestures captured by cameras, but through quiet acts of compassion that ripple forward through time. His own family had found peace with the attention and changes that had come from the discovery. Margaret had become something of a local celebrity in their neighborhood. Known as the wife of that guard who found Princess Diana's will, she handled it with grace, using the platform to advocate for better support for healthcare workers and their families. Sarah had gotten married the previous spring, and she had asked Thomas to mention Diana in his Father of the Bride speech. Tell them about what she taught us, Sarah had said, about integrity and doing the right thing even when it is hard. I want everyone at my wedding to know that is who my father is. Michael was thriving at university, studying civil engineering with plans to work on affordable housing projects. He often spoke about how his father's example had shaped his career choice. Dad showed me that your job is not just about what you do, Michael explained in an essay for one of his classes. It is about why you do it and how you do it. He could have ignored what he found. He could have protected himself from scrutiny and judgment. But he did not, because doing the right thing mattered more than doing the easy thing. That is the kind of person I want to be. On this anniversary morning, standing in the library alone, Thomas reflected on the unexpected journey that had begun with a fallen portrait and a hidden compartment. He thought about all the lives that had been changed, all the dreams that had been made possible, all the families that had been supported. He thought about Diana sitting in Richard Pemberton's office, recording that video message with the faith that someone honest would eventually find her document. She had been right to have that faith. Against all the cynicism in the world, against all the reasons to believe that people act only in self-interest, Diana had trusted that integrity still existed. And Thomas had proven her right. Not because he was special or heroic, but because he was ordinary. because he was a man who had been taught to do his duty, to be honest, to think of others before himself. Those ordinary virtues, applied in an extraordinary moment, it changed everything. As Thomas prepared to leave the library and return to his rounds, he paused one more time before the portrait of Queen Victoria. He wondered if she would have approved of Diana's secret trust, of this quiet act of rebellion against the idea that service should go unrewarded and unrecognized. He liked to think she would have. Thomas placed his hand briefly on the wall beside the portrait, feeling the cool stone beneath his fingers. Then he straightened his uniform, checked his radio, and walked out into the corridor. He had a job to do, rounds to complete, a castle to protect. The work was the same as it had always been, but Thomas Crawford was not the same man who had walked these halls 2 years ago. He had learned that one moment of integrity could echo across years and miles. He had learned that kindness matters, that service matters, that doing the right thing matters even when, especially when, it would be easier to look away. He had learned that legacy is not about being remembered. It is about what you leave behind that continues to make a difference. Diana had left a trust fund, yes, but more than that. She had left a message of hope and respect for people who often go unseen. Thomas had simply been the messenger, the bridge between her intention and its fulfillment. As he walked his rounds that morning, nodding to other guards, checking doors and windows, maintaining the security that was his duty, Thomas felt at peace. The story had never really been about him. It had been about a princess who cared, about families who struggled, about a system that too often overlooked the people who kept it running. It had been about the power of compassion to transcend death and time. The secret will had changed everything. Just as the title of Thomas's story suggested, it had changed how the royal household viewed its staff. It had changed over 150 families' futures. It had changed how the public remembered Diana. And yes, it had changed Thomas Crawford, a simple guard who had simply tried to do the right thing, years from now. When Thomas retired from his service, when his children had children of their own, the trust would still be helping families. Diana's legacy would continue. A quiet revolution of kindness, funded by investments and administered with care. And somewhere in the archives, the original document Thomas had found would be preserved. A testament to the fact that one person's compassion, coupled with another person's integrity, could indeed change everything. Thomas completed his rounds and returned to his post. The Scottish wind blew cold across the grounds, carrying with it the promise of winter. Inside the castle, warmth and history intermingled, secrets and stories layered in stone and wood. Thomas stood at his post, a guardian of both the visible castle and the invisible legacy it now held. He had found a secret will hidden in a library, and in doing so, had proven that the old values of honor, duty, and integrity still mattered in a modern world that sometimes seemed to have forgotten them. That was the real legacy, the true change. Not the money or the fame, but the reminder that we are all capable of moments that matter, of choices that ripple forward, of being the person someone else believes in even before we find them. And in that quiet knowledge, Thomas Crawford stood his watch, ready for whatever other secrets the ancient walls might yet reveal, confident now in his ability to meet them with the same integrity that had guided him through the most extraordinary discovery of his life.